On October 24th, 2025, a film adaptation of Warren Zanes' Deliver Me From Nowhere, starring Jeremy Allen White, henceforth Jaw, in the lead role, entered wide release. For a mass-market biopic, the film promised to be unique. It eschewed the typical panoramic, life-spanning approach, instead focusing on a very narrow band of Springsteen's career, the writing and production of Nebraska. Focusing on Nebraska was itself a surprise. While it was a top 10 album and is beloved by his biggest fans, it's certainly not his best-known work. None of its songs are among his most listened to songs on Spotify, and with the exception of Atlantic City, which was boosted significantly by the band's cover, none even come close. When I heard this was how they were approaching the biopic, I was pretty excited. In advance of Deliver Me From Nowhere's release, I wrote an essay about why so many biopics are so underwhelming, chalking it up to safe depictions of their subjects over too long a span of time, thereby prioritizing breadth and flattery over depth and honesty. Deliver Me From Nowhere promised to do neither of these things. Its relatively narrow timeline and raw emotional source material set it up to be that rarest of things, a biopic that is itself a memorable work of art. And it wasn't, not remotely. Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere is a resolutely underwhelming experience. Writer-director Scott Cooper mishandles this precious source material worse than Mark Sanchez did at Jets offense.
Of course, the offensive coordinator, you got a busted play here, and then Sanchez gets hit.
He brings no apparent passion or vision to this project and turns what could and should have been the biopic that did it right into a dimensionless schlockfest. That's right, a dimensionless schlockfest. Deliver Me From Nowhere delivers on almost no levels. Its most glaring flaw is its script, which comprises a sequence of half-baked scenes whose dialogue is canned, cliched, cheesy, and otherwise cringe. In a scene where Springsteen and his manager John Landau, whose portrayal by Jeremy Strong is one of the film's stronger elements, are discussing his next project, Landau tells Springsteen, "You finished The River with only $20K in your bank account." This is true, and it's something Cooper clearly wants us to know, to understand that Springsteen wasn't yet the titanically wealthy rock star that he is today, which, if revealed properly, would be an oh shit moment for an uninitiated audience member. But revealed this way with so little humanity, it has practically no impact. Springsteen knows his financial situation, and a relationship this special, this personal, this rare, just wouldn't call for such a stilted statement of fact. It feels like Landau is talking to us, not to Bruce, pelting us with facts instead of letting us marinate in the pair's rare bond. Another egregious offender is Springsteen's first date with Faye Romano, a fictional character amalgamated from several of Springsteen's girlfriends at the time. The schlocky moments in this scene are almost too numerous to mention. There's Faye leaning her head out the window of Springsteen's Chevy Z28 Camaro, letting her hair blow in the wind, and hand-feeding us the idea that she's a carefree foil to Bruce's intense, anxiety-ridden soul. There's Springsteen turning on the Asbury Park carousel after hours, reassuring Faye by saying, "In this town, I'm king." There's a minute and a half or so of utterly sparkless dialogue. "Is it illegal to smile in here? Not in Asbury." Followed predictably by a kiss. Odessa Young and Jaw do as well as they possibly can, but the words give them almost nothing to work with. The relationship winds up feeling like a cardboard device instead of the emotional locus that it's meant to be. Outside of a few exchanges between Springsteen and Landau, the depiction of whose relationship is probably the film's strongest element. There's not a single line of dialogue that feels remotely real or that reveals something deeper than the words the characters are using. This is unforgivable, and it's only one of the film's many issues. Another is that the film is totally joyless. Cooper depicts Bruce as an intractably morose character, capable of only the most half-hearted and strained of smiles, never once expressing unabashed joy, including the few times we see him on stage. This makes for a very narrow dynamic range and is also just plain inaccurate. In addition to the recorded evidence of Bruce laughing during the recording of Nebraska, thank you, Nebraska 82. The video footage of Bruce's performances from this era capture what might be the person most in their element of anyone ever. What don't you know? Bruce relishes every moment on stage, drinking it down like an alcoholic does booze. And yes, he used performing in front of enormous adoring crowds to fill a void that would inevitably empty as soon as he got off the road. But the reason he or any addict does that kind of thing is because it works. Speaking from experience, I can tell you that in that moment of a sublime performance, the void is filled, it just doesn't stay filled. Without seeing any of these emotional heights, it's hard to believe in the emotional depths that the film spends so much time wallowing in. in. This issue has ripple effects. Without a real internal man versus self battle, the film feels devoid of a real conflict. Outside of his wrestles with his past and with his muse, whatever Bruce wants, he gets. He wants to release his bedroom demos instead of a studio-grade album. Okay, sure, no problem. He wants to put his recording engineers through hell mastering demos from a roughly handled cassette tape. Okay, sure, no problem. He wants no singles, no press, no tour to support the album. Okay, sure, no problem. Bruce has few to no external obstacles, and yet the film alleges that his anxiety and depression can be attributed to external sources. His upbringing, his romantic struggles, his artistic difficulties. I wound up feeling like the film, and perhaps Bruce more broadly, just missed the point. Based on his father's life, his depression was at least in large part an internal hereditary chemical issue, something that would overtake him whether there was something external to pin it on or not. Therefore, we should have felt this anxiety almost every moment of the film. It should have been simmering always, poised to consume him with or without warning. The film's score, which is never more painfully conventional than when the violins swell as Bruce sobs in his therapist's office, is largely to blame for the absence of this anxious feeling. There were a couple of things I liked about this movie. As a writer, I enjoyed seeing the writing process, which is generally a solitary, unsexy affair, glorified. I did enjoy the chemistry between Jeremy's Alan White and Strong. Strong in particular did a wonderful job of alternating between stalwart defender of and bosom buddy to Bruce. Jaws' singing and playing were for the most part convincing, especially a note-for-note, phrase-for-phrase, rasp-for-rasp take on Born in the USA. Born down in a dead man's town. My main issue on that front is that they just didn't give him enough performance time. Bohemian Rhapsody culminated in Live Aid, which we got to watch. A Complete Unknown culminated in Newport 65, which we got to watch. Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere culminates in the Born in the USA tour, which we do not get to watch. Instead, we just see him striding sweatily backstage after the show. Deliver Me From Nowhere was slated to be an A24 production, but after what Variety described as a wild weekend of a bidding battle, 20th Century Studios outbid them. 20th Century Studios is a subsidiary of Disney and generally produces such mass-market films as Avatar, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Deadpool and Wolverine, and the Bob's Burgers movie. A24, on the other hand, is responsible for one of my favorite biopics, Priscilla, which is a delightfully textured rebuttal to the vapidly carnivalesque Elvis. In light of Deliver Me From Nowhere's dispiriting one-dimensionality, it pains me to think about what could have been with A24 at the helm. Now, as is the case for most biopics, there are a lot of filmgoers who will enjoy hanging out with Bruce, listening to songs that they know, and watching the film build to an outcome that they knew before the film even started. But to this avid filmgoer, Nebraska performer, and Bruce acolyte, it was a downright condemnable effort to portray a critically important moment in the boss's career. Unlike most biopics, which are slick executions of flawed approaches, Deliver Me From Nowhere got the approach all right and the execution all wrong. Cooper brings no apparent vision to this project. It feels like he skimmed through Zanes's enthralling book on a Friday, wrote up a placeholder script on a Saturday, started shooting on Sunday, and wrapped everything up in a week or two. So I would give Springsteen Deliver Me From Nowhere a D for dead on arrival. But hey, and if A24 is listening, maybe everything that dies someday comes back.